and welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. I am so grateful that you're here. My name is Kim Meninger, and I'm a women's leadership coach. I started this podcast because as a lifelong sufferer of imposter syndrome and a coach who sees this in 98% of the women I meet, I wanted to take this conversation to a bigger stage, so to speak. Imposter syndrome is triggered by a lot of things, but two of the primary triggers are transitions and feeling different from those around us. Women in traditionally male-dominated environments experience these triggers on an almost daily basis, so it's only natural that we would feel this way. What compounds these feelings is the sense that we are alone. The belief that if we share our feelings, we'll expose our incompetence even further. So we carry it around like a deep, dark secret. I started this podcast because I want to put a stop to this nonsense and destigmatize imposter syndrome. Because we don't talk about it, we look around and assume that everyone around us has it all figured out, that we're somehow the exception to the rule, when in reality, we're all feeling this way. And when we can own that and say it out loud, we all benefit. Nobody more so than you. So thanks again for being here. If you enjoy it, please share it with others who might also benefit. Right, welcome Sandy. I'm really excited for this. I know you and I have talked about imposter syndrome over the years, and I'm really grateful that you're here to have this conversation with me today. And I'd love for you to just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Kim, and it's funny, we've been talking about this topic for so many years, and you would have thought we could have stopped talking about it at this point, but nevertheless, it persists out there. All right. I'm Sandy Silk. I'm currently Director of IT Security for Education and Consulting at Harvard. So my team goes out and consults with departments, faculty all around the university on high-risk projects. So we're really kind of frontline talking with the business, with the faculty, with department administrators, IT project managers. So it's kind of cool. We get to see everything that's going on in the university, construction projects now with smart buildings going up. So I've been there about 6 years, and most of my career was in financial services. In cybersecurity, info security, and it's a field I never thought I would be in. So, already coming in as kind of imposter because I never studied in college to be in this later.
That is interesting. And I want to dig more into that as we move forward, because I think you're hitting on one of the imposter syndrome triggers too, of taking a non-traditional career path, right? And so when you're comparing yourself to people who I've known I wanted to do this since I was a child, or I studied everything in college, right? So that's really interesting. Before we go down that path, I would love to ask you just my general opening question of what does imposter syndrome mean to you? And then related to that, how, if at all, has it shown up in your own work or in your own life?
Oh, absolutely. Well, to me, imposter syndrome is kind of that never-ending self-doubt that, I have what it takes or not? And constantly almost avoiding opportunities because you've got a fear of failure. You've just been programmed somehow to think you don't have enough of something. And so you may hold yourself back from opportunities because you just don't want to feel the hurt of rejection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good point. I think fear of failure is one of the hallmarks of imposter syndrome. And unfortunately, that keeps us from taking the kind of risks that may help us to get to where we want to go, or may help us to even increase our confidence more generally as we move forward.
Yeah, and it holds you back in your current position too, because you may not value the skills, competencies, insights that you have already that are different than other people on the team. But you're trying so hard to be like everybody else that you don't appreciate the strength you bring for being perhaps different.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is it's just a classic symptom, so to speak, of imposter syndrome. So how has your own personal journey been? I know obviously if you've taken some twists and turns in your career.
Yeah, absolutely, twists and turns. I never thought I would be working in IT or working in now, cybersecurity. This wasn't even a career path when I started in it, which, I find it funny that people will say, oh, it's not the traditional path to get here. I'm like, it's such a young profession. There is no traditional. It's too young to have a tradition at this point. I studied German languages and literatures actually, I went into college as a biology major, and I was finishing up my language requirement, and I got offered a trip to Germany for 6 weeks in the summer to go study at a Goethe Institute, which is a German language institute, if I would just declare a German major. So it was freshman year. I was like, sure, I can always undo it later. It's not official till the end of sophomore year. So I just stuck with it after that. So I went in a biology major. Chemistry was not something I was, really my strong suit. So that kind of helped me back off that as a double. And came out a German major. Went to work for like 5 years, decided I should go back and get a master's because all my friends were becoming doctors and lawyers. And I was like, what have I done with my life? So I went back to pursue a PhD. I was going to be a professor. And I stopped at the master's. I had a temp job, summer job, working as an executive assistant for the CIO of one of the groups at Fidelity. She happened to be a female CIO, and she just saw so much potential in me. It's amazing the language skills, the analytics, the pattern recognition there just translated so easily into IT. And they needed a whole new program started up, and she saw, analytics, solution, problem solving, communication skills. And I had also worked for 5 years before going back for my master's. So I had business skills too. So they could teach me the technology. I could pick that up. So, and then I was just in IT from then on.
That's amazing. And did you feel like an imposter? I mean, how did you process moving from the German language, right, into IT?
I have to say, not so much in the beginning. I was always in fantastic groups. I was often the only woman, especially in those early years of information security. But they were always fantastic people. The culture was terrific. So, they were sending me to courses and trainings just like they did for everybody else. I was picking it up. These were new emerging areas that, like identity theft, recognition, prevention, Red Flag, USA Patriot Act, all these new regulations coming in at the time. So everyone was learning them. And remote work was kind of new at the time too. So that's one of the beauties with IT is that it's always evolving. So there's always something to learn. So if you can come in during one of those new things when everybody's learning it, then you're no worse off than anyone else. I will say it probably became the worst working at Harvard for me very recently.
Really?
Yeah. Well, at Fidelity, I'd been there 15 years. So people knew me and they knew what I could do. And they appreciated everything that I had done in those years too. And I moved to different groups. So I had, a breadth of experience, knowledge about the company. And then coming to Harvard, and I've got my master's from Harvard. So I'm a grad of Harvard. And yet working in the IT security group there, and I don't have a PhD, now you're at like the probably best known Ivy League. If you're in IT, do you even really need a bachelor's degree to work in IT? But I'm feeling less than, not that everybody else has PhDs in the group. I don't think anybody does in the group, but yet it's Harvard. And you can feel like an imposter in that academic setting where people love to have healthy debates and question things and push back. And it can be pretty intimidating at times. So I think now, oddly enough, in, kind of like the peak of my career right now, I'm feeling it more than ever.
That's so interesting. And I have definitely heard, anecdotally from so many people in academia that it is a lot stronger for them because of what you're describing. There's really smart people, really well-educated people who like to have those types of conversations, who kind of flaunt their expertise, right?
Yeah.
And I think also a lot of people who are insecure overcompensating too in some of these situations, which makes other people insecure. And so it's definitely, and there's a lot.
Perhaps, and coming in, I don't have the known experience with all these people, the shared background with them. And I'm coming from not academia, but someplace different. And academia would like to think, oh, we're so different than anything else because we're decentralized and stovepiped and every group has its own budget. Like you're describing exactly where I came from. It was a private company and it had lots of business lines and they all had their own budgets. I don't understand why you think this is unique. But okay.
So how do you manage that? How do you manage the moments when that self-doubt or that insecurity starts to creep in?
Yeah, well, now that we're home, there's always wine. That's not smiled upon so much in the office. It's having, unfortunately, over the years, I did develop a strong network of good friends, colleagues, peers who are also women and men in the industry that can just kind of talk me down. Just like, Sandy, what are you talking about? You've got this skill, you've got that, you're the best I know at X. Why do you think you don't make it there? If this were you anyplace else, would you feel comfortable? And it just kind of gives you that sanity check to say, you're freaking out over nothing. This is not real. You're inventing it in your head. And let's come out and talk to people that know you and can just reassure you, or I'll call my mom, who'll tell me the same thing. And my dad will tell me the same thing. My husband's my biggest champion too.
You're hitting on a really important point there too, because one of the biggest and simplest strategies that I recommend for managing imposter syndrome is to just get it out of your own head, talk to other people, get that outside perspective, because I think sometimes we're so ashamed, we feel the doubt, and then it's compounded by this sense of shame. And I don't want to talk to people about it because I don't want people to think I don't know what I'm doing. And then I carry it around as this deep, dark secret, and it just gets more and more power than it deserves.
Oh my gosh. Or what if I say something to them and they affirm it?
Yeah.
Which is not going to happen, but
right.
There's like, oh my God, it's like you keep your mouth shut and everyone thinks you're an idiot versus opening it and confirming everyone's suspicions.
Exactly. But you also talked a little bit about the tendency we have to want to be like everyone else. And so we underestimate the value of what makes us different in this effort to compare ourselves and try to compete with the people around us. Now, I think you're a perfect example of having something that's different, right? Like just the path that you took to get here. Is that something that you have consciously tried to remind yourself of, or to kind of stay connected to, as what makes you different?
I do now. I absolutely do now. And on the one hand, I do have the professional certifications that others do, because that's almost your entry ticket into this, to get through HR screening for job postings and such. And that was also to prove to myself that I had the same chops that everyone else did. I can pass that same test. and prove myself that way on paper. But I do like to remind myself, remind other people that you don't have to have a specific degree. You don't have to have any degree to do well in this field. As long as you are not afraid of technology, you're committed to ongoing learning, that, frankly, if you will talk to people versus, and I think people have a stereotype of cybersecurity is you're in your basement in your hoodie pounding away on a keyboard, which now might be more the case just out of necessity of, I don't have a home office, so I'm in my basement and I'm dressed comfortably. But not by choice. But I do remind people, and I stand up for others. I've heard people say, even where in the broader scope of Harvard, oh, well, we hired this consultant to come in and do this project, and they really didn't seem to give us what we wanted. But, I think they were like an English major or something. And I'll step right in and say, you do know my major is in German. So let's not go there. Perhaps you didn't communicate what you wanted well to this person and they didn't read your mind. So let's not blame their degree. What I chose to do when I was 18, when I had to declare a major, has no bearing on my ability to do this work today.
Exactly. And I'm curious too, what your experience has been, and I know you and I have traveled in similar circles as it relates to women's leadership, and you've been really out there in the diversity and inclusion conversation. Like, what if anything do you think has been the effect of being a woman in a more traditionally male-dominated space?
Well, it's funny. In the beginning of the career, I certainly would notice I was the only person in the room. But again, I had fantastic managers, and often on business trips, they would defer to me and let me lead a meeting, talking with, I'm the only woman in Silicon Valley talking to startup developers about what they're going to need to do to improve their program if they want to work with Fidelity. I mean, I didn't even realize what was going on at the time that, this little petite woman was telling everybody what they had to do. And now when I go to meetings, I might be one of two in the room, not at Harvard, but when I go out to conferences. And there's certainly women in tech gatherings. They always have some wine reception for us women, but at like executive dinners that are hosted around when we used to do these things before pandemic, I might be the only woman in IT in like a leadership position who's been invited to this thing. And it never fails that the conversation will go to the men asking me, the men saying, I have a daughter and I really want her to get into IT. What do we do to make this better? I'll say, take a look around the room here.
Exactly.
Do you think your daughter wants to be me, the only one in a room full of men? So start hiring some more women into your own teams. Find a way to get to them, network. I mean, I have on my team, the majority of us are women. And all of us have diverse backgrounds, some with engineering degrees, one with computer science, one with an MFA, another one with an English major. And it's just the diversity of ideas and thinking. And we can honestly we'll go together to conferences and do a workshop with all of us together saying, this is our team, this is what we look like. So that people can see you can make a difference if you will get out of the mindset that you need to have a 4-year degree in computer science. You're like, oh my God, if I studied computer science 15 years ago, what about that technology you learned then is the same now?
It's true.
So why do you think that's the be all and end all versus I self-taught and I went to courses and such in the last 5 years. So I'm probably more up to date.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because we talk a lot about diversity at the more like racial and gender level, right? But there's a lot, I think, of lack of diversity based on the selection process in different organizations of just this very rigid, narrow criteria for how we're going to evaluate candidates based on, like you're saying, what their degrees are in or what schools they went to, just things that are so proportionately a small percentage of the population, right? And if everybody went to Harvard, right, in this case,
Yeah.
everybody studied computer science, how are you going to have any diversity of thinking in that population?
Well, just to say a 4-year degree, you've already ruled out such a high population of Black or Latinx populations. And then to say in a computer science field as your concentration, you've already ruled out like 80% of women at that point. So why are you surprised then that you don't have diversity in the candidate pool? Instead of saying, well, what do you want for the skill set? And advertise for the skill set that you want, not the degree that you want.
And I know I've seen you speak on this topic. I know you've been out there very publicly talking about this. Have you noticed any shifts? Do you think people are listening?
I think in certain industries they are. I've seen Google, Microsoft, Ernst & Young have advertised you don't need a 4-year degree to work with them anymore. So I think already, and it was hard to convince Harvard to say you don't need a 4-year degree because that's kind of our business.
That's right. That's a little tricky.
Yeah. We won't turn you away if you have one, but we don't require it now. But you're certainly seeing, especially in IT space, where there's such high competition for a declining amount. What they're saying is a declining amount of talent out there. I think they just haven't evaluated the talent correctly, because I keep seeing more and more people come through programs like Perscolas, or there's one in New Hampshire. I'm not getting the name of it off the top of my head now, but these intensive courses, months long, to get you trained in technology, especially in the security area for our area of interest. And I make sure to connect our IT recruiters with these programs to say, come on, if we have jobs posted and they can do these, why wouldn't we pull from this population who have made such a commitment to go through this program? And these are people who could not go through college because they were working 3 jobs, trying to take care of their 2 kids at home, just could not afford the time and the money. So they get this opportunity instead, and they're going every day for like 10 weeks, 9 to 5, to finish this program and get better jobs. So, I mean, if that's not dedication, I don't know what is.
Right. Absolutely. And they've proven their work ethic, just like you said, in the fact that they didn't go to college and had this other set of responsibilities that they were managing. So I think so much of this boils down to broadening the way that we think about candidates, the way that we evaluate potential. And that certainly ties into this whole experience that we're talking about, right? Because if I somehow make the cut, right, and I'm the one person who doesn't have a 4-year degree, and it's still, maybe I'm an exception for some who knows why reason, but it continues to remain on the job description, it continues to remain valued all across the organization, I'm always going to feel less than. I'm always going to feel like an imposter. Right?
And do you take advantage of a tuition assistance program to get that, just so that you can say you have it?
Right.
Or do we change our thinking and say, my God, look how much they did, and I don't need to make them jump through this hurdle? as well, or over this hurdle, through this hoop. Yeah, it's the rest of us looking down who maybe were privileged enough to attend. But are we always going to say, wow, look, despite your setbacks, look at all you did? So we're always going to remind them of that setback, which is just unfair to, instead of saying, damn, I don't think I could have done that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's a condescending way of thinking about it, really. Yeah, that's really true. It's obviously progress takes time, right? So there's a lot that we're all pushing for and a lot of change that we want to see. Do you feel optimistic about the experience, for women in particular, but just more generally as we move towards greater diversity and inclusion?
I do, to a point. I think for a number of years, many of us are still going to feel like we were the diversity hire, because we're still going to be the pioneers until there's actually a 50-50 in this industry, and the women are continuing on into leadership positions. So it's not a fluke, or, well, you can be like the computers and like Hidden Figures, that movie where they were actually the ones doing incredible math very quickly, and yet they were looked down upon and made less money. So until people can actually start seeing past color, gender, culture, religious differences, preferences, and sexual partners, any of that, and just look at the work and how much better the team is when you have different perspectives, and when you're developing products for a more diverse group, and your group can actually represent that and say, oh, have we thought about X? Like, oh, I would never have guessed that's how someone would use this.
That's really true too. I know every time there's an epic fail in the headlines from a marketing perspective, I always think there's not enough diversity in that room, right?
I know. All the white folks thought that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. It really is mind blowing that we're still having this conversation. But
I don't want to tell the current administration that English, the United States has no official language. English is just kind of it by default right now, because the majority of the population continues to speak it, but there's no actual declaration anywhere that English is our official language, and that can change if the population changes.
True. That's very true. Absolutely. Yeah, and your language background will come in really
I think German's got to be. Perhaps I can learn another language.
That's right. It'll be easier for you to learn a third language. Is there anything else that you would recommend to other women who are listening around just managing this whole experience of feeling different in an environment that, whether because of their educational background or gender or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend think hard before you commit to another technical training program or certificate, pursuing a new certification, just because, well, others on the team have this, because becoming more and more like the others on the team may not be what's going to make the team stronger. And looking at what strengths you bring to the team, which could be in technical areas, but it could be you're a better communicator, you collaborate better with others, you have stronger network, so you can influence more. Whatever those are, don't downplay them. And I'm speaking particularly in IT. There's a shortage in skills of people in IT who can communicate, influence, collaborate. And those are the skills that many of the studies are showing are lacking. So you can learn more technology if you've learned some already, but really look at what are the harder things, the cultural skills that you bring that are so important to the team's success, and don't downplay them.
I think that's such a great point too, because I know that I tend to see this in women more so than in men, but it's anecdotal again, is that we have, when we do feel self-doubt, when we do feel that sense of insecurity, it's always, well, what's the course I can take? What's the certificate I can get, right? What's the book I can read? We're looking for all this validation and this ability to prove I know what I'm doing. And it's not necessarily going to give you the return on investment that you're looking for.
Right, exactly. And it's only going to make you feel, it's only going to point out to you the knowledge you don't have.
Yes.
But if someone else on the team has it, why do you need to get it too? We got it covered.
I love that too. To think of yourself as part of a system, not somebody who has to know what everyone else on the team knows, but what's your what part do you play in that system, and then really invest there.
Absolutely. And if we could get more managers thinking of their teams as teams, especially when someone leaves and they have to backfill a position, to really look and say, all right, what are we missing? What do we need? Instead of, let me post a job description that's an amalgam of everybody. When you get the unicorn description, you're like, nobody has all these skills.
Exactly.
What two do you need? Really? What two do you need out there?
Oh, that's perfect. This has been a really great conversation. You've certainly given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure others are hopefully taking a more optimistic view of what opportunities are available to them too. And, not necessarily thinking in these very narrow boxes that make it hard to move. If you, like you said, your industry, cybersecurity, is such a young profession that there isn't a whole history of people who have prepared for this over the years.
We don't even know what certification we're supposed to have. There are so many different ones out there. You're like, I don't know, choose which one of the 10 you think you should have.
So hopefully for anybody who's interested in making a change, that's something that feels doable.
Oh, absolutely. And, and talk to, especially now we're home with the pandemic, don't lose touch with your connections. Call them up. Maybe don't put them on video yet again, because we're all doing it so many hours.
That's true.
Phone calls, fine. But call them up and talk with them. Don't let yourself wallow in your self-defeatist attitude, but talk to some people. Just make sure you're still connecting.
Yes, I think that's a great suggestion. And I also think, I often say, don't let unsubstantiated assumptions dictate the path that you take, because unless you know for sure that this is not a viable path, and it's come from more than one data point, right? Then you have no basis for thinking that it's not a possibility. You got to go out there and talk to people.
Yeah, the answer is no, unless you apply for something.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So I want to just wrap up with a couple of questions I generally ask, which are, what motivated you to want to tell your story today, and what are you hoping people will take away from it?
What motivates me is I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I think it's important for others to realize they're not alone out there. And I still have the self-doubt almost every day. Something comes up, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And then I'm like, oh, Sandy, stop. Just try. You can do this. Or you can't. And if you don't, that's fine. You can do 99 other things. So I think it's important that people realize that, and people realize those that they view as leaders. We don't often see ourselves that way, especially if we've dealt with feelings of self-doubt, whatever. But we're just people too. There's nothing magical about us, or, we just happen to take advantage of the right opportunity at the right time because we didn't close ourselves off from it. So try something new. The worst that happens is it doesn't work out and you try something else, but you won't, the only thing you regret are the things you don't try.
That's exactly right. And I love what you're talking about. I would say if there is any magic, it's trying, right? It's going for it. And you can't control the outcome, but you can control whether or not you decide to pursue something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just give yourself some leeway to not be perfect in every way. None of us are. Celebrate that.
Yes, that's perfect. Perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Sandy. This has been such a great conversation.
Oh, it's so nice to talk with you again, Kim.
Thanks again for listening today. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome and you'd like additional support, check out the show notes for more resources or contact me directly. I would love to help you. And if you'd like to tell your story, I would love to interview you. You will find my contact info in the show notes, so reach out anytime. Thanks again.